Okay, hello everybody, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar by the Cork Food Policy Council. I think we're in for a treat. We have a fabulous lineup of speakers here today. My name is Janice Harrington. I'm the current chair of the Cork Food Policy Council. And we're really lucky to be joined today as a co-chair by my colleague, Dr. Colin Sage. So Colin was the founding member and previous chair of the Cork Food Policy Council. He's an author and editor of a number of books on food and our sustainability, and holds a visiting professor roles in the University of Gastronomic Sciences, Turin, and the American University of Rome. And Colin is currently living in northern Portugal, so I'm very jealous about that. So Colin, I might just hand over to you initially before we start meeting our speakers.
Thank you, Janice. It's a pleasure to be here and to be amongst such distinguished company. While the webinar is really going to drill into some of the strategies and some of the tactics and some of the activities that are going on around building a more sustainable food system in Cork. It occurred to me that it would be worth taking a couple of moments just to remind ourselves why we do this work, because it's 2 weeks after the United Nations Food System Summit, for which there was a lot of expectation and hullabaloo, and it really passed without much attention being paid to it. And that doesn't mean to say that the food system, a global food system, is in any way sort of resolved, everything's working fine. It's not, as we know, in all sorts of ways, not least because of the environmental consequences arising from the food systems as they operate today. So in some ways, what we do on the ground at local level in places like Cork is really about trying to rebuild a system that is fit for purpose, that actually serves people's well-being, serves their health and nutrition, as well as a more sustainable system that works with the environment rather than against it. So in some ways, it's worth reminding ourselves of these big, if you like, big issues that which we might not think about every day, but these are the motivating forces that get us to think as individuals and collectively as communities about doing things differently. And, I suppose since I left Cork and since I spend time here, I kind of think about some of these questions about what are our rights to food? How do we express our demands for a more effective, more sustainable food system? What are the rights of eaters in the food system in that respect? And it's not just the right to get access to food or to be fed. It's about actually having some determination, some agency over, the food system that we want to operate in our name. And that means also engaging in production as far as we can. And that's where, listening to people like Fionnuala will be so very, very effective, because she's been leading the charge on that. So there's lots of things that we can say about the motivating factors. The Food Policy Council in Cork, we founded, me and several other people back in 2013, really coming out of the work that was going on in Knocknaheeny under the leadership of Nish. And Sarah's going to talk to us much more about that work and the creation of the community garden in Knocknaheeny, which really has been very, very important symbolically, if not actually practically, in terms of the lead off it gave to taking things further in Cork. So that was very important. And the other shout out really that needs to be made at this stage is the work that's been done by Denise Cahill as coordinator of the Cork Healthy Cities project, and her work with the City Council. I mean, she's been indefatigable in terms of leading that work and sort of rolling that work out, and the fact that we were able then to build upon understanding, I suppose, the importance of food consumption as a gateway to good health, you know, and that many people unfortunately are not eating as well as they might, and it's leading to all sorts of problematic health outcomes. So working around health, of course, was vital, and of course keeping in mind, if you like, the bigger picture of planetary health as well. These two things are really very, very important. So I think I won't say much more. There is a paper that came out in Food Policy just recently, which looks at the formation and the creation of the Food Policy Council in Cork and compares it with what happened in Bergamo in Italy. And if anyone's interested, Aoife is going to is posting a link on that, on getting access to that paper. And if you haven't got access to Elsevier's kind of expensive online, you know, journals, then you might ask her and she might send you a copy. So that's if you're interested. But it really tries to talk a little bit about the background and the drive, you know, in creating the Food Policy Council. And I suppose really what I'm interested in hearing is the local initiatives that have been taking place since well, while I was in Cork, but then since, and the work that Jack has been doing in Neighbour Food and also Fionnuala, really developing the emancipatory potential of growing food. And if you think that sounds grandiose, well, it really is. It's important, you know, this work is really vitally important. So for that reason, it gives me great pleasure to be here. And I look forward to listening to everyone else who's speaking this afternoon. So thanks very much. Janice, back to you.
Thanks, Colin. So we have 2 hours for our session today, and we're in a number of different, I suppose, thematic areas. So the first section, we're going to look at food growing, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Fionnuala McCarthy. So Fionnuala works as a community food growing coordinator with the Cork Food Policy Council, and she sits on the Cork Food Policy Council steering committee as well. And Fionnuala's role involves offering support and advice to new community food growing initiatives and completing an audit of the community food growing in the city. She's an experienced adult educator in horticulture and community development, and she's passionate about developing community well-being through urban food growing. And we're really, really lucky to have Fionnuala in this role in Cork, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about her work. So Fionnuala, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, thanks, Janice, and thanks, Colin, for that. So yeah, my name is Fionnuala McCarthy. What I'm going to present to you on today is food growing initiatives, and actually very recent food growing initiatives. So I'm not going to go back into the past of Cork Food Policy Council's ones, actually very topical ones that are right now happening. So I have, sorry there, I'll just. So the 4 that we're going to have a quick look at is Bishopstown Park, Toker Community Garden, Deer Park Community Garden, and International Solidarity Garden. They're the 4 that I'm going to do a whistle stop tour for you of. We'll start with Bishopstown Park. There's a lovely design there done. So I suppose Cork Food Policy Council plays a supporting role. That's the first thing to emphasise about it. It isn't Cork Food Policy Council going out to places and saying, oh, you should be growing food here, this is a great spot or something like that. It's a supporting role. It's advising and linking stakeholders really all the time. So a design was done for this project by Kinsale College Sustainable Horticulture students. They did the design. Tidy Towns are very involved in this project. They funded the polytunnel and they're going to be doing some growing there. TELUS International sponsorship was got from them for 18 raised beds and fruit trees, and actually Ciara Parsons from TELUS updated the design then as well and worked in conjunction with it. So that's to give you an idea of the different kind of stakeholders and the linking that we do when we're working on a project like this. So the goals of this project were to create a space pleasant for walkers and park users, to create a beneficial area for wildlife, to create sensory experiences for park users, to have harvests from every design decision so that there's a harvest possible from everything in it, to have a dedicated area for food growing, and then to create spaces in which outdoor education can be enjoyed. So when we're looking at a project like this and that linking of stakeholders, we're looking at sustainable development all the time. Will this solution last? And that's the question that needs to be asked around what we're doing. So looking for building communities that are resilient for the long term. So that looks like how the space is going to be used. Can we have multi-user happening in the space? Can it be for people who are just going for a walk or can enjoy the wildlife? Is it supporting pollinators? Is there also food growing happening? Are there schools involved? Everything that's involved in it. And then also its sustainability is who are those partners who are involved in it? And Tidy Towns, for instance, are an example, are a long established organization. So having them involved as one of the stakeholders, you're feeding into that for the sustainability of it by involving an organization with a good, strong track record. Schools as well, then obviously well-established organizations in the area. And actually 3 of these beds there's 18 beds in this project, 3 of them are designed as wheelchair accessible because one of the schools has many students which are wheelchair users. So looking at that design from youth up, there's park benches. So some of the planting for the pollinators, while it's been planted for wildlife and pollinators, it's going on in front of where there's park benches for people who can sit and enjoy it as well as being active in the food growing. So again, looking at sustainable development then on the practical side is actually looking at the soil and the site itself and how can we make it more sustainable in what we're doing. So 2 of the aspects of this in the permaculture design that was done for it would be a fruit forest to rejuvenate the soil on site, which is heavily compacted for machinery necessary for the construction of the playground next to it. And then planting of trees within that fruit forest in the higher order. Trees help improve soil structure with the root systems and with the bacteria and fungi which live around their roots. So you're talking about long-term planting, not just the food. When we plant food, it's quite quick, it's seasonal a lot of the time. So involving a design where there are trees as well in it is part of that sustainability and long-term look at it. And willow planting as well. So there's a plan for planting along the river to aid with that soil stabilization. Stable soil is key to the success of the polytunnel. So that's sustainable design all the time feeding through whatever's going on, from whether it's organizing the community, the stakeholders, in what way can support that, and as well the actual planting and the design of what's going in there on site. So the next one then we'll have a quick look at is Toker Community Garden. So this one you can see there on the map, it's sort of like a pizza slice. It's that little bit that's a pizza slice. So Toker Community Garden is being developed in association with volunteers first and foremost, and they're down first. Again, it isn't Cork Food Policy Council going in and saying this needs to be developed. Volunteers in the area are the driving force for this. What they want in the area. Also then Cork City Council, Toker Tidy Towns, and then the Cork Food Policy Council. They have a very active Facebook site, and there's actually, it's really, at the moment I saw just today on Saturday is their first event for planting. If anyone wants to volunteer and get involved, they're going putting in raspberry canes on Saturday at 11. So you can check out their Facebook page if you want to get involved in that. They're recruiting more volunteers at the moment. There you can see the design of it again by Mark Tierney. This one was done at Kinsale Community College. Proposes 18 raised beds, accessible to all, small orchards. So again, putting in trees, cobnuts, a young tree nursery for native species, native wildflower beds, and a bed dedicated to cut flowers. What's unique and quite interesting in this one, and it was a push from the community as well as a teaching area, to invite experts to speak to local schools and groups about how to get the best out of their Toker Community Garden. Again, ownership by the people living in the area, being educated in the area, and what they want from it. So you can see there, they had a call for local volunteers to help, was put out in the Echo, and they're assembling raised beds. That's happening on November the 5th. There's a big day happening November the 5th. If anyone wants to volunteer on that, where they're actually putting in the raised beds and things. It's a big day of planting. All welcome, young and old. And again, we're looking at assets-based community development. And how can we support based on the assets that are already in the community there? So what are the resources, the talents, and the abilities of the community, and build on that foundation? A big part of that as well is Kinsale College, Sustainable Horticulture in Cork, that we can access permaculture students to be involved in that kind of sustainable design. It's very unique in Cork that we have that. And Cork Food Policy Council have made that link with them and linked them up. So they're now doing work in the city and in urban areas, which is exciting to have that expansion happening. The next one on the whistle stop tour is, I picked a housing estate. It's now Deer Park Community Garden. This is a really interesting one that happened during lockdown. So you can see a picture there on the side of families putting in the beds. So it was residents wanted it in one of the greens in a housing estate. Completely came from residents that they wanted this. It actually happened during lockdown. Self-start community development, which is the kind of support that is given for self-start stuff. So with Cork Food Policy Council leading from behind, where you're behind the scenes, you're not the one front and center, you're just linking people up, linking resources up, whatever you can do. So it was, again, this was designed by Kinsale College students. They came and they helped install it with locals, supervised and with the locals, and it was supervised by their tutor Donal Chambers. So it's benefiting both, because the students get to work on a real world project. They get to see their design coming on the ground, which is important for students to learn the different, you know, you can design something on a page, but how do you putting it into place in horticulture on the ground is different. And the learning from that is invaluable. And they're doing real world projects around the city. So it's a great link, and it's about community connection, especially in that during a time of isolation. There was a WhatsApp group set up and you had neighbors meeting up who'd never met before, you know, going to work, coming home, and it was great. It was absolutely a fantastic initiative, again, led by the residents, not by Cork Food Policy Council. I suppose the ethos is that people approach us who want help on something and getting started, and then we slot in with that help and support wherever they're looking for it. So I just put up there about self-determination, which Colin mentioned there at the start. We're more satisfied and successful when we can pursue goals in our own way, rather than according to a strict external system of regulation. Even when pursuing extrinsic rewards, we're more satisfied and self-actualized when we pursue them autonomously for our own reasons and with our own methods. So the families deciding where they want things and working and telling the students on the design of where they want the actual beds themselves, what they want to grow in it, rather than being told this is what's going to be grown here. That sense of self-determination for building resilient community then, and that ownership is there from the very beginning. Once projects are run that way, that sense of ownership for the people who are going to be maintaining it long term. Cork Food Policy Council aren't, the residents there are. So that self-determination, that ownership from the beginning needs to be there all the time. And I suppose taking that behind the scenes approach to supporting is the way to ensure that. So the last one then, this is the latest one, which isn't actually, we haven't broke ground on this yet, but it's the name, we're working on the name, International Solidarity Garden is it so far. So again, a supporting role in this project, we have with Cork Migrant Centre, the OLA Sisters, Horticulture Course, LTI, SHEP, and then Cork Food Policy Council, basically linking all of these people together. And that's it, that's the role. It's linking all of these people together so it can happen. So Cork Migrant Centre, working with people, families in direct provision, we're looking for a space to grow where people, families in direct provision could grow their own food. So then us linking them up with somewhere where there can be land where they can do that, that fits in with the ethos of the sisters of social justice and environmentalism, fits in with that. In the area, there's a horticulture course, which is going to help with the groundwork and as well is going to, you know, loan tools and make that accessible. You've SHEP are in the area as well. They're going to allow people who come to use their kitchen facility and toilet facilities. So all that practical, how can we make this practically happen? And I suppose, again, just emphasizing our role is just linking these people up to make it happen. So the idea behind this garden then, it will be raised beds and things like that for growing food, a variety of different families to use it. The design isn't even done. In this case, we're going to work with the families who are going to be using it to design it themselves. There are plenty of people there who know probably more about garden design than I do, and maybe have a long work experience in their home countries of actually working in growing crops. So they're going to actually do the design, and again, ownership from the beginning, and that not this is the way you should do it, but you, what way do you want to do it? And that's what we'll help you do. So for people to have access to open space, to utilize their skills, to connect, to grow their own food from different countries and have a go at it, and just that cultural exchange. So again, with this project, just looking for collectivity, empowerment, capacity building activity, and to form networks between sisters, chef, horticulture students, you know, and just expand those networks. So to finish up, this is my last slide. There's Maria Young, and that's the email address. If you in your area wants to set up any project like this and would like some support, she's the woman to contact. She's the woman on the ground. That's why I have her picture there of her on the ground. She's the one, the force behind all of this that really is the full energy on it. So just to finish up, I wanted to kind of just summarize, I suppose, the community development principles that are behind these actions, that it isn't just something that's going on and we're just doing. So with the vision, a vision of a just and sustainable world, principles working under social justice and environmental justice, the values behind these programs, an ideology of equality with respect, dignity and trust. And that took time, and it takes time to build up trust within a community. And that's been happening over the past 3 years now. And it's up and running, trust between all the stakeholders that this can happen and these things can happen. The process then is working through critical consciousness threaded through practical food growing projects. So all of these theories and these principles are fed through the practice that happens on the ground. Looks simple on the ground. Just going to put in some veg, but there's a whole host of stuff behind it. Collective action is very important, looking from small local projects to moving them across the city, which I hope I gave you a scope of there, from very small, a couple of beds in a green in a housing estate, to out to bigger projects then like Bishopstown Park. But that no space is too small. It can be a small pocket, it can be a bigger project. Theories behind of power, disempowerment, and then of course working towards empowerment all the time of local communities to grow their own food themselves the way they want to do it. And then the context for Cork especially, practice situated in political times and built on unique assets of Cork City. So the one I put there would be the permaculture students. It's a unique point that we have in Cork, that we have that. Those connections have been built up between the college and Maria, and it's fantastic to have those designs, that we're getting permaculture designs. I mean, I think Cork Food Policy Council is a unique asset of Cork City as well, and certainly Maria's and the work that she's doing. So that is it, and I think I was on time.
Thank you so much, Fionnuala, and that was an awful lot of work to get into such a very short period of time, and I think you captured the work and the importance of the work fantastically. And I think it also highlights, you know, within the communities, the importance of these alliances and, you know, identifying the key stakeholders within your group, that, you know, it's not about reinventing the wheel, it's about making these connections and joining the dots between the different groups for the collective good. So thank you very much for that. So I just encourage anyone to put questions in the Q&A if you have any questions for Fionnuala. There's one question there, Fionnuala, in the chat about a map. Is there a map of where, I think that related to the Bishopstown Garden, where exactly is it in Bishopstown?
Sure, so it's in the park alongside the playground. But I don't have an address. I don't know what street that's on in Bishopstown, sorry, unless any of you do.
Yeah, so that's at Curraheen Park, is it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Yeah. So we can put up further details on the website as well for here after this session. And so if there are no other questions, we might just move on and might keep some time at the end of this session for further discussion then. So our next, we have two speakers in our next section, and we're looking at access to local food producers and the growth of online platforms for food provision. So our first speaker is Jack Crotty of Neighbourhood Food. So Jack is the co-founder of Neighbourhood Food, which was started in December 2018, and it set out with the goal of getting more people eating locally produced foods. And the First release was neighbourhood food markets, which there are now 40 plus operating across the country as of 2021, allowing more people to buy foods from the local farmers and food producers. And the new move for neighbourhood food is a software that's facilitating B2B management for wholesale, which is in beta testing. That will be released nationally in early 2022. So Jack, I'm looking forward to hearing more about neighbourhood food and the new developments that are due to come in 2022. So if I can hand over to you.
Thanks, Janice. Thank you very much. Can you guys hear me properly? Yeah, super. So thanks again for having me join you guys on this one. Yeah, I suppose I'll just give a quick overview of neighbor food first for anybody who doesn't know what it is. But basically, I originally am a food producer. I would have had a kitchen situation in Cork where we made food and sold it at farmers markets, and I have always sourced food from local producers. So I saw that there was a move happening where farmers markets were a little bit more kind of luxury and a little bit more Saturday morning type spending rather than actually productive shopping experiences. So for people who genuinely wanted to fill their fridge with bread, eggs, veg, meat, dairy, and the kind of basic, what we call primary produce, it was becoming more and more difficult to find those things and to buy them in an effective way. But it was also difficult for the people who produce those things to be able to sell them. So neighbor food was considered to be a way with many different arms on how we can possibly bridge that gap more. And I guess I firmly, personally believe that technology, and in particular software, is the tool for small businesses to be able to compete with larger ones. So we started with the neighbor food markets concept. So the idea was that we would identify a collection point in a community, which would happen once a week, and then customers would buy from the range of local producers in the area with the handover taking place at that collection point. So for example, there are collection points now in Ballincollig, Cork City, Middleton, Douglas, Carrigaline, Passage West, Watergrass Hill, Lizavard, Bantry, Ballydehob, and we're mushrooming out, and we have a great success the closer we are to home. So the typical with everything, the further we're moving away, the more sparse they get. But in and around Cork, we have an amazing density with very broad range of producers. There's different ones at each market, but there are some who supply all of them. And then you basically buy into your local food hub, and you can buy food there weekly, become part of a member. And there's a small bit of a kind of a membership thing where there's emails are sent out and you're aware of new products and new news. And that is a way where you can stay engaged with people who genuinely primary produce things in your community. And then I suppose COVID happened. So this pandemic suddenly did two very big things. The first one was it made people realize that access to real food produced locally was very, very important, and the need to support your local economy. But it also pushed people into online. So the idea of not being so afraid of software and different types of technologies was a really good push for people to realize that there are easier ways of doing things. So that was from a customer's point of view. For the first time, a lot of people bought groceries online. It was the kind of final frontier of online shopping, was that people hadn't really bought food for the fridge. And but more than that, actually, it brought producers. So a lot of food producers would be very small businesses. They would be doing every aspect of their business themselves, and they might miss the opportunity to be able to make things simpler for themselves. So COVID did that. So to this point, I was just checking while I was listening to the last presentation there are 1,805 producers across Ireland and the UK who've applied to join to Neighbour Food. So it's a huge number of people. We're not able to work with all of them. Unfortunately, if there isn't a collection point available for them to supply, we can't really do much for them at the moment. But it is a great list that we have to be able to work with, and we can actually build technology specifically for food producers to be able to make their work easier, to be able to make customers access that food better. And ultimately, this new addition that we're adding for, which is the wholesale application, will make it easier for local food businesses such as restaurants and delis and food shops to be able to buy from these local producers in a more simplified way. Because at the end of the day, and I ran a food business myself, it's so tempting to just ring one number and contact, and that one supplier has all the different things that you need. At one point, I remember, and I rarely did it myself, so I have to give credit to my mother, who I worked in the business with, because she used to always do the ordering. She could be ringing 20 different people every evening, placing orders. And some producers wanted a text message, while another needed an email, one needed a phone call. And you have this kind of very rudimentary roadblocks, basically, to actually be able to do it. So our plan with this wholesale application is that it will be a better ordering system than Palace. So we always try and say, like, and the same way with neighbor food markets, I believe, and I'm probably not the best person to say it, but we certainly aimed to be much better than Super Value for ordering your groceries. That was always kind of the aim. So this idea is to try and bring the artisans to a level where there isn't as many roadblocks. So there isn't really a way for a restaurant to say, I can't find this kind of stuff, because we'll have a search functionality with a map, which will show you, here are all the people who have milk in the whole county of Cork, or even in Edinburgh in Scotland, where we're also operating as well. Here are all the people who grow vegetables in the different seasons that they're available. And with one click, you can be connected with them to be able to place orders. So I guess we're very lucky in that COVID gave us a bigger exposure. We're also very lucky that it gave us the opportunity to build a bit of a team, because for long enough, I was kind of left with myself and my business partner, Martin, who's the developer. We were left doing everything ourselves, whereas now there's actually a team of 5 of us working on this. And yeah, it's a great network of people to be able to work with, because I feel like the gaps that we're able to fill are just so big. You know, there are so many farmers who really are missing out on the opportunities that automated invoicing and statements can do, and a portal that manages all your stock levels so that all orders can come in with cutoff times and different things like this. So, I mean, in a nutshell, that's where we are. But what you guys would probably be interested in knowing is that a huge number of people wanted to try and source food from local food producers. And I think generally across the board, I can say that appetite has not exactly waned after COVID has ended. It does look like as if local food primary producers, growers, milkers, animal husbandry, anybody out there who's actually making food from the land in Ireland seems to be busier. So that's the tidbit that I can offer out there, is that people's fridges are filled with, you know, proper eggs that came from hens that were living outside, and pigs that might still have a tiny little few hairs on the end of the bit of bacon, and you know, that definitely has happened. So I think maybe if anyone had any questions, it's such a massive world of things that you could talk about. So I think I'll probably stop there. And if anyone would like to ask me anything, I'm more than happy to answer it.
Thank you, Jack. And so again, I just encourage people to put questions in the Q&A, but I really like your benchmark. And I think it's important to have benchmarks of, you know, benchmarking yourself against the likes of Super Value and being confident that you can be better. So I think it's setting our bars and our benchmarks, and I think that's important. And I think it's great. I mean, and the way it has grown again, it just shows, you know, kind of, as you mentioned with COVID, you know, with challenges, when we're faced with challenges, we need to find and identify the opportunities that are presented to us when addressing some of these challenges. So I think you've highlighted that quite nicely. And we might move on to our next speaker if there are no questions, and I think we can come and process a lot of these towards the end of the session. So our next speaker is Professor Mary McCarthy, and Mary is going to speak to us about doing food sustainability in the household. Who is doing what? Mary, she is a professor of marketing at Cork University Business School, and she was a principal investigator in the HRB Centre for Health and Diet Research. Mary's research interests lie in the field of consumer behaviour, with a particular reference to food, health and sustainability. So Mary, I'll hand over to you, and looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just start by sharing my screen. Thank you very much, Janice. I'm absolutely delighted to be here today to spend a little time just drawing attention to some of the findings that we've had from a piece of work that we have undertaken that is looking at what's happening behind closed doors in households and what they're saying, and also how different groups might exist. So it's really who's doing what and why. So it's providing a little bit of insight there. This is important, I suppose, in many respects, because the household practices relating to food are significant with regard to their environmental impact. It has been highlighted that maybe 30% of the environmental impact of households could be attributed to food consumption, and indeed up to 50% of food waste in European households are food waste in Europe comes from the household. And that's some of the figures that are suggested. And that links back to the types of practices that we engage in potentially and how we interact with those various food provisioning routes that we can see. So in many respects, we can actually run into challenges in every aspect, which can ultimately lead to environmental implications and resulting in those household sustainability or household environmental impacts that we spoke about earlier. So right from what we choose to buy through to how we store and waste food. And I suppose it's not that we don't recognize that, we do. There is evidence out there to suggest that we are trying, based on the narrative that is there, to do things in our everyday practices to support the actual reduction of our own personal impact on the environment, going from things like our product choices to dietary changes, curtailment of meat or increasing our vegetarian consumption, through to seeking out local, as we saw Jack speaking about there, and in seasonal products. But also we are attempting within our households to reduce waste through different mechanisms. And we are concerned though about what businesses are saying, and we are concerned about credentials as well. Importantly, we have struggles as well, such as struggling to give up meat. And in this European study, for example, it illustrates that up to 50% of us have a problem with that. We do have other struggles as well with regard to changing our practices. The cost of time and effort are constantly mentioned as issues around becoming more sustainable in our food practices. And then our concerns about what suppliers are saying to us, and indeed greenwashing may have created this problem or challenge over time. So we were interested in that. So what I'd like to just draw your attention to briefly, and maybe as I draw attention, you might reflect on whether these type of characters mirror some of the thoughts and experiences that you have, or you may know characters like what I'm going to present. I'm going to answer or reflect on what consumers and households are thinking and doing around food sustainability. And we're all thinking and doing the same things. And then what frustrates us with regard to the main food provisioning systems that we have today, and therefore what call to actions are required. We looked at in a particular study that I'm just going to give you top line findings on, things around profiling groups of individuals based on the level of responsibility they hold for food provisioning in the household, the extent to which they have actually started to engage in adjusting their diet, what they're seeking from a food product characteristic perspective. Are they looking for a local? Are they looking for credentials associated with the product that suggest that they're appropriate to consume at a particular time of the year, etc.? How are people managing their leftovers, preparing food, etc., planning? So it's that whole process of acquisition through to disposal from a waste management perspective, and how we deal with excess stocks. What we found generally was people are trying to give up meat, but they find meat difficult to give up. So they're struggling with that. Some are doing it better than others. Country of origin, price, seasonality are of interest, more so to some than others. In season and domestically produced tend to be important to everyone, but how it's understood can vary. There are some management of the food consumption processes occurring, but waste is still appearing more in some households than others. And that's basically what I'm saying all the time. There's more and less depending on who we look at. And that brings us to the idea of different groups within the population that are engaging at different levels with regard to sustainable household practices. So these are the personas, I suppose, in a sense, that emerge from just looking at those types of questions that I presented above. So we find first, we're going to meet four characters, I should say. The first is Joe. Joe is a young professional. And he may be living at home with his parents still, or with other young professionals. He doesn't take a lot of responsibility for food provision in the household, unsurprising if he's part of a family unit, are equally unsurprising if it's a group of professionals together. He's talking about doing in the future sustainability, so it's an interest. But Joe currently, I suppose, is a trend follower in many respects. So there's an advantage to that from a sustainability perspective, because he's embracing in consideration of vegetarian meals and is open to that, and is curtailing to some extent his actual his meat consumption patterns. When I say he's following trends, the important thing to note is that he does also look for foods with special dietary requirements. So he's that's in trend as well. But he's also somewhat impulsive in his purchases, which is leading to some waste. Now, Joe equally has friends like Jean and Jenny who are similar in nature with regard to practices. Young professionals following trends, interested in sustainability, but thinking about doing it in the future. Jerry is a different character. Jerry is an older man who's very much interested in quality of products. Seasonality, fair trade are central to his choices as a result. He manages leftovers. He's paying for premium products. So we think about Jack's neighbor food product offering. He will be the type of character that would go there, buy products, spend a little bit more, but is not wasting. He likes his meat. He ain't giving it up anytime soon. This is the impression you get from Jerry. But he is trying to be more sustainable. But in the context of managing food and his appreciation of food, he inherently does that anyway. Now we meet June, and June is our enthusiast. She is the person that's leading the charge. She's maybe in part-time employment, but she's enthusiastically embracing the many elements and dimensions associated with sustainability in the household. She is looking to consume a more sustainable diet, like reducing her meat intake. She's also eating more vegetarian meals. She's interested in fair trade, seasonality, and local produce. She strives to create, not to create waste by using her leftovers. So she's thinking about what she can do with that. She's developing skills to that end. And June's counter opposite is Jennifer. Jennifer is an individual who is working full time. She has a sense of responsibility for providing food for her household. And she feels that responsibility. It's almost like the idea that it is the woman's role from the past to do this, carries heavily on her, but it's not with enthusiasm that she does it. So she tends to be more impulsive in her purchases and is unplanned and unstructured. And consequently, she buys things that are not consumed and then tends to generate waste as a result. She's not interested in sustainability as one of the things that she's concerned about with regard to food. So I suppose sustainability and the environmental impact of the household. Jennifer is one of the laggards with regard to change, while June is one of our innovators, our early adapters, and Jerry has a different take on this. And I suppose Joe, our first lad, will follow the trends, so there's great opportunity there to increase his activity. Another element of the research was just saying, what are we complaining about all the time? What are our big gripes from a supply chain perspective? And there are a few constant things, and even big gripes at ourselves, like what are we doing that we really would be better off not doing? And I just very quickly, I'm not going to go through these in any detail, the slides will be available for you to look at afterwards, but people talk about packaging and plastic and not knowing what to do with it, and it's on everything. And indeed, people that purchase online witness this very much when it's delivered home and they start to take everything out of the packaging. So they have that concern about, particularly in the vegetable category. And then those value for money offerings where the quantities are large and unrequired, thus generating waste. So seeking value creates that problem. And knowing what to do, so lack of knowledge and information. Equally, there's this idea of being organized. And again, how organized we are in our planning impacts upon the extent to which we're impulsive. The idea of the environment that we navigate through and how that's staged is critically important for some. The idea that when we enter the main retail multiple, we have to navigate through a store of temptations before we get to what we want to need. And as a consequence, we actually gather foods and items that we hadn't planned and don't have any real need for, which generate either waste or maybe from a health perspective, we're better off not consuming. So there's this organization piece, which online actually helps support a movement away from disorganized to organized. Time is our enemy. We have so many other things that are happening in our lives. And we're trying to navigate food provisioning practices within that space. And while we might love to be more sustainable in our practices, We are just trying to deal with the everyday challenges of raising families and doing and engaging in our work lives. There's also the health motivation, which can be contrary to sustainability motivation. How do we make sure we feed enough and have enough food? We want to have enough food for our family to provide. And equally, special offers in the fruit and veg category. I'll buy more because it's really, we could improve our health strategy here if I have this, and we might get into the habit, but there's no planning behind it, so it goes to waste. I suppose by way of conclusion, after this very, very short whistle-stop tour of some top-line findings around the characters and challenges that we face, are that we all kind of express this need to help with dealing with the plastic issue. And there's lots being done in the food supply chain around this, but there's an opportunity to do more. And our alternative food networks and those types of supply chains seem to be doing that better with regard to figuring out how to keep and supply things that go looser. We need help in the fruit and veg category. And this has got to do with quantity management. There is no point in buying fruit and veg on the hope that it might be consumed at some point. It goes to waste. That's what the evidence is suggesting from the research that we're doing. And equally, then when it's controlled by quantity by the supplier, we might want 1.5 punnets of grapes. We have to buy 2 to get special offer, and 1 is not going to be enough. So we're caught between the 2. Planning is key to minimizing. So we need support on planning, and therefore the online and innovative technologies can support that process for many families through providing existing lists, etc. We need help navigating retail stores, and again, online can help here, because the staging of the retail store needs to be reconsidered as well to support an effective navigative store from a sustainability perspective. We need help organizing food within the home, and this has got to do with things like social learning. We've heard about the community gardens and how people are learning from each other. Equally within households, how can we do this better? How can we use our leftovers effectively, etc. We also individually flexible in our preferences, because that's a challenge with leftovers. It's not exactly what we want. 2-day-old bread or 3-day-old bread is not as nice as lovely fresh bread that we see as we smell as we walk through the retail store. And very, very importantly, everyone is not the same. Indeed, we have different people at different stages with different requirements. And there's a huge potential to enable and support everyone on a journey towards more sustainable practices. Interest in food is key. So we have our innovators in there, our enthusiasts, our genius of the world. But we do recognize that we need to normalize what they are doing through, I suppose, socializing the concepts and ideas that they're doing. And everyone has a role to play in that. So knowing what others do can help us in the context of what we might do ourselves when we see as appropriate. In many respects, from a supply chain perspective, the ask of all suppliers is to inspire, support, and facilitate citizens and households in enabling more sustainable food practices. Janice, I hope I didn't go over. Thank you very much for your attention.
No, thank you very much, Marion. I was just laughing at the picture of the punnet of strawberries there. I think I saw that referred to it recently as the cemetery, the fruit cemetery in the bottom of the fridge. So, thank you.
Yeah, there's a term that's used. It's called the coffin of decay.
That's it. Yes.
Coffin of decay. I think, and that's one of the challenges we have with leftovers and surpluses in households. It's that we procrastinate on using, and then we can excuse ourselves for throwing them out because they've gone off.
Yeah, and I think both your presentation and Jack's before you just highlights the importance, I suppose, of creating these supportive environments, whether through online or within the supermarket, and creating those supportive environments to help and empower people to make the choices that are more suitable for them and their families, both from a health, sustainability and food waste perspective. So we just have one question here in the Q&A for yourself, Mary. How do you feel about the underlying systemic pressures that need to be transformed for a truly sustainable food system? So for example, packaging and plastics are indicative of long supply chains or food waste, and cooking our cooking takes time, but society doesn't value the role it takes to source and cook nutritious, sustainable food. And that's from Rochelle Connolly.
Rochelle, that's a very, very big question. I'm not too sure I have the answer. I suppose fundamentally what we're trying, I think it's a long journey. What's happening within the supply chain to try and address the plastics issue, because we as citizens are very much demanding that now. I mean, that was very widely heard here, but we see sort of now the use of more cardboard, etc. I think there is an over packaging still, particularly within certain categories, that really requires those mainstream suppliers in particular to deal with that, as you say, from a long supply chain perspective. The actions of organizations such as Neighbour Food, the community food growing, they're all part of, I suppose, the answer as well, because we're now moving away to more loose types of product that are fresh and local. So there's a less of a demand for packaging. The problem, I suppose, with cooking is there is a perception in some cases that it is extremely time consuming, but equally can be as time consuming to look for alternative solutions. It takes time to go to stores and buy convenient type of products. We don't normally go so I suppose parents are pulling in on the way home or going back out to get products, and then they only have partial meals, so they're actually trying to find solutions. By planning and organizing, it's enabling the planning and organizing phase within the household, that time saving can occur with the cooking. There's no reason why one uses more time in the cooking practice if you actually have planned what you're doing ahead. And there's utilizations of technologies to support that. I think the online piece is very important here. And then we think about things like smart fridges, so we know what we're missing, so we're not buying products on the off chance that we might need them. And I think there's a lot of social learning and highlighting how others are doing, and retailers, whatever form they may take, can really support that socialization of what others are doing. So X number of consumers make this with that, and it only takes 5 minutes. So it's that type of idea, is constantly having these little conversations, highlighting what is normal, what others are doing. That can be very supportive as well. And they're very short answers to a very big question. And I feel I'm just chipping the corner off the iceberg by answering it in that way. So big question.
Thanks, Mary. We may have time to come back to some of these towards the end of the session as well. And so with that, we're going to move on, and now we're going to focus on healthy eating in the community. And our speaker in this section is Sarah Carr. And Sarah is a community health worker based in Knocknaheeny Holly Hill Community Garden, which is part of the wider health project Niche. Sarah supports the community members there to experience food growing and the benefits of the natural environment through workshops. And Sarah's done some fantastic work with the community in Niche, and so I'm looking forward to hearing about some of those. Sarah, over to you.
Fantastic. I'm just going to share my screen there and we'll get going. Good, it's going well, I think. Right, can everyone see that? So I really hope, firstly, thanks for the invitation to speak, and I hope I can do my colleagues and the project, and most importantly the participants, justice. And off we go. You'll see a lot of photos in my presentation and a lot of me talking. Just to say, the pictures were taken pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, just in case you've seen people walking around without the masks on. That was taken pre-pandemic. So for those of you that don't know Niche or don't know the community garden that we kind of manage, it's a health project based on the north side of the city in Knocknaheeny, Holly Hill area. Niche it's a well-established health project that's been going for over 20 years, and I've only been with the project 2 years, coming up to 2 years now, so I'm still quite new. I'm based in the community garden, so we have 2 sites. One is a community garden. We're a funded project, mostly funded from the HSC, but we have other streams of funding to run different projects too. We promote health. We're a health project, so it's given in the name really, but we're so much more than that as well. We kind of promote skills, education, connectedness, and all with kind of a theme of sustainability, especially in the garden. This was a photo. It's impossible to capture the whole garden in one photo. So we have a building here with a large kitchen, a workshop area, and it's well kind of kitted out for that. So we're very lucky to have it, and it's a key part of the project, and you'll see why later on. To the right of that building there, we have a very large polytunnel, and to the left of the photo, another large polytunnel. Behind the building is an orchard with apples, berries, pears, and the raised beds here, which were newly put in last year. We have perennials and the beds there that we raised up for ease of access, and more annuals, flowers and salads and things like that. So that's just giving you an idea, but just to say, because I might forget at the end, anyone who's attending this webinar is very welcome to come visit the garden. Participants are always eager to show people around. Come and have a bit of lunch with us. It's the best way to get a sense. So what we harvest, food growing is an element. We do a lot in the garden. There's woodwork projects. We had sewing classes there this morning. We do organic food production as well, on a smaller scale since the pandemic. But this is some of what we harvested this year. And when I made the list, I thought, wow, it's quite a lot. And I don't think I even included everything. I just wanted to point this out. I think it's good to see, you know, what projects and, you know, what people can get growing. Even when you consider it's small scale, we still produced a lot of vegetables through the seasons. You can see us planting the potatoes there in March, and then we harvested some in July. Potatoes are absolutely the favourite vegetable to harvest and eat, along with cabbages and the apples, the least favourite being the courgette and garlic, funnily enough, but we still grow them, trying to slowly introduce them. A question we get asked a lot is, what do you do with the produce? And I can 100% say that we use everything that we produce. So whether it's given out to participants, you can see Anne here in the top left-hand corner with a purple cabbage that she sowed the seed to. Now, Anne doesn't really like purple cabbage herself, but she's taking it home to her daughter, and she was incredibly happy about that. Ladies in the bottom left-hand corner here were making stuffed grapevine leaves. We have grapevines, so the leaves were being used and stuffed with rice. You can see Joe here. I asked Joe, we had a harvest of cauliflowers. Now the thing is about seasonal growing, you suddenly have an influx of a lot of vegetables. So we had lots of cauliflowers coming up. I'm not the best cook myself. So Joe here, who attends the garden, also works part-time as a chef. Sorry, I've gone back there. And I asked him to come in and kind of showcase some vegetables for us. So he came in and he cooked a cauliflower bake. So that picture's just below him there. When I'm saying that now, and I realise cauliflower bake's probably not the healthiest food to eat, but it really showcased the food, and we all gathered around the table. You can see then a pumpkin is being sliced up and pears are being prepared for a dessert. So that's very seasonal cooking. That would be what we're harvesting this time of year. So it's always using the produce in the garden. The Freuger young men here were sowing carrots and pulled them up to take home. There's a lot of cooking going on in the kitchen. So the kitchen is absolutely the most important part of the project. We'd be lost without it. And honestly, as a food growing project and promoting health, you know, without the kitchen, without the ability to show people how to cook the produce we grow, we'd be a bit lost, because we be sending people home with courgettes and kale and cauliflowers, and people might be saying, well, I don't know what to cook with this. So having the kitchen facility and the staff to kind of get it going and starting cooking projects is absolutely important. The bottom right hand corner here, we made pizza, again, not super healthy, but we made it from scratch. And the whole idea behind that was I had a polytunnel full of rocket, and we decided to put rocket on top of the pizza, and, you know, people had never eaten rocket before, and it was a nice introduction to it, you know, putting it on top of the pizza. So that's really what we do. It's seasonal cooking, seasonal eating. Introducing new vegetables, as I said. So how many things can you do with the courgette? Well, I'm telling you, the staff have to get creative Googling before we go in. You can see here on the left-hand side, lasagna made with sliced up, thinly sliced courgette, col cannon there in the middle, but instead of using the cabbage, we used spring onion and kale and chard, I'm never sure how to say that, but you can see Rob chopping it up there. So we're really slowly introducing it, but we're not, you know, pushing it on people. We're there cooking it, and people are asking questions. So it is that conversations around a table or conversations in the kitchen. My job would be a lot easier if I could just stand up, hand out some leaflets, or give a presentation on healthy eating, on how to reduce your salt intake and making better habits while you're chopping and your 5 a day. I mean, we all know we should be eating 5 a day, but you know, how practical is it? This way, you know, having the kitchen and be able to come in and ask other people to cook if they're comfortable and if they have the recipe, or me coming in myself and saying, you know what, I'm going to make a chutney today. I've never made it myself, but we're all going to make it together. Here's the recipe. Somebody's chopping the onions, someone's chopping the tomatoes, someone's stirring the pot, and we're doing it collectively. During that conversations happen, you know, somebody was putting apple cider vinegar into the recipe, into the pot, and was saying, well, what is apple cider vinegar and what benefits does it have? And someone else then saying, oh, I know that stuff, you can use it for cleaning too. And you know, these conversations happen. And this conversation went on into the next day when someone else came in and said, what's in the chutney that you made? And someone was, you know, listing off the ingredients and said, oh, did you know apple cider vinegar is really good for you if you want to lose weight? And all this, you know, all this information that was coming out, which was great. And honestly, that's how we operate. It's organic, it's conversations, it's very informal, it's making people feel empowered and passionate about the cooking. These two photos, I just wanted to show that, you know, pre-COVID, we'd all be inside around the kitchen table, and then post-COVID, well, during the lockdown, when measures were reduced a little bit, we were able to move the kitchen table outside. So we didn't let it stop us. We were still sitting around a table just out in the fresh air. So I've spoken about the informality of, you know, conversations around the table, but we do also run workshops to open up to the rest of the community as well, and just put ourselves out there, invite people in. So a popular one is jam making. So we have grapes and lots of different berries in the garden, red currants, black currants, things like that. So we advertise a workshop. You see there the ladies on the right attended. We had just a small group due to COVID restrictions, but these people came in from the community and took part, and it was great. We did it outdoors. We got the camping stove outside. I mean, if you don't have a kitchen, you can get creative and create the kitchen outside. And everyone went home with a jar of jam. Again, not the most healthy, but definitely a healthier alternative to a jar of Nutella or maybe store-bought jam. And it was produce that came from the garden, and I think people take great pride in that. We also operate on a no food waste. So these are photos taken yesterday and late last week when we were making the chutney. So, you know, we had the tomatoes didn't do very well in the garden this year, so we ended up with a lot of green tomatoes. And I was there scratching my head thinking, I actually don't know what to do with this. So I was Googling recipes. I mean, this is what the staff do. We just have to get creative. So again, I went in, having never made chutney before, and I got everybody involved. You can see a lady there chopping the pitted dates. There was people all around the table. One was chopping onions, one was chopping the tomatoes, someone was stirring the pots, someone was sterilizing the jars. So everybody's involved and we're all working on the same recipe. So, you know, and promoting that, you know, that those tomatoes would have ended up in the compost and that would have been fine, but a much better use of it is now we have 24 jars of chutney. And when I left this morning, there are only 2 jars left. So that's very telling, you know, people taking it home, they're taking it home to their daughter or their partner or their mother, and they're really passionate about it. And, you know, we put it up on our Facebook page and members of the community then are asking, can I come in and buy a jar? And that's absolutely welcome too. I couldn't talk about healthy eating in the garden without mentioning the men's cookbook. So the men, this was pre-COVID, took part in a course. Now they created a cookbook. It's called Loaves of Lattes, Reflective Cooking by Northside Men. So this was a project that was run with Niche and the HSE. And it was primarily about mental health and starting conversations with men about their mental health through cooking. But what it showed us is that the men really enjoyed being in the kitchen, enjoyed cooking, something that was primarily what the women volunteers of the garden probably took over a little bit. So they kind of took ownership of it and would look after the men. Whereas this project kind of allowed the men, give them space to really get in touch with their cooking and embrace the kitchen. And that's still very much going today. So they launched their book during COVID. That's the top right hand corner there, and the book's available. We have it in the garden there if anybody wanted to pop in and get a copy. Or the men, you know, have their own recipes and talk about the benefits of the project. But the men are still very passionate about cooking, and you can see the roast potatoes there at the bottom with the fresh rosemary from the garden. Sometimes we just cook one kind of big dish, like whether it's cauliflower bake or just a really big bowl of roast potatoes. But people really do mindful eating and really enjoying the produce there, and all, you know, with the benefit of, you know, all the health benefits are discussed but not, you know, pushed upon people. It's not that we're forcing you to kind of eat this. It's like, come celebrate the food that you've grown, come cook it, be valued, and you know, participate in something bigger than just taking home a quarter kind of thing. And that's it really, guys. I kind of flew through it. I really hope I did it justice. There's just some few photos there of people harvesting. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And I think what just oozes out of that presentation is positivity. And I think it really just highlights that, you know, food is not just about what you put in your mouth. It's about much, much more. It's about where you get it from, who you eat it with, how it's prepared, who you prepare it with. So, you know, the much wider, and I think that really, it's a really nice presentation to highlight the, you know, some of the social determinants of health and social determinants of, you know, dietary behaviors as well. So thank you very, very much for that. And just in the essence of time, I think we'll just move on to the next speakers. So the next speakers, there's two. We have Taryn Kelly and his colleague Nicole Dennehy from Ballyhora Community Food Initiative. So Taryn and Nicole, I will hand over to both of you.
Thanks very much, Janice. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great.
Perfect. So thanks everyone for having us here today. We're delighted to be here. So I'm Nicole, as Janice mentioned. Taryn is here with me as well. So for those of you who don't know Ballyhora Development, we're a local development company. So obviously with that, we aim to develop communities, both, you know, socially, economically and environmentally. And as part of that, for the last 6 or so years, we've been involved in the Safe Food Community Food Initiatives. So what these are, basically, we take it upon ourselves to go out into the community with one large event a year and 2 small events a year. So the large event might be something like tying food events into our Science Week festival, or the small events might be cooking courses with local family resource centres or community groups. So there's a couple of different resources that we've developed to support these initiatives and these events over the years. So we're going to have a quick whistle-stop tour of how they came about and how we use them and kind of our learnings and our experiences from that. So hopefully it'll be useful. We could talk about this all day. There's so much in it. So it is a really quick whistle-stop tour, but as always, we'll be happy to answer any questions at the end. So I suppose the first resource that we developed came about from a partnership with the University of Limerick. So at our large event, one of the dietitians who lectures in University of Limerick, so Dr. Anne Griffin, very generously came in and gave her time to speak at our large event. Now, obviously, like, we're constrained with budget, so having somebody willingly come in and freely speak for us was absolutely fantastic and has also led to really, really useful partnerships. So based on her work at that large event, she became more interested in our small events and decided to bring her master's students on board to make a case study of community food work and what UL could do to support that food work. So out of that, we collaborated with the master's students to create what we call the Healthy Eating Toolbox, which is basically evidence-based advice on healthy eating, food safety, food storage, food waste, healthy shopping trips, and, you know, a little bit of meal planning. So I suppose there's a couple of really key points about this, primarily that it is evidence-based, but in a very, very accessible way. So, you know, we're all very used to the healthy food pyramid and all these different guidelines, but this is a resource that's really very accessible. It's full of kind of picture guides, practical measures, for example, of how you measure what a portion of protein looks like. So this can be used by anyone from children, adults, educators, anyone you like, really. and it just translates that scientific dietitianry or dietetic advice into practical measures. So we've ended up incorporating this healthy eating toolbox into all of our food projects. And as we've deployed it with those projects, it's kind of led to the development of more resources. So I suppose the first thing that followed this was the tutor guidebook, or the kind of the train the trainer kit that the following year of students developed with us. So this is a more in-depth look of what the Healthy Eating Toolkit does. So while the Healthy Eating Toolkit is an introductory tool for people who may never have come across some of the concepts before, this tutor guidebook really kind of delves in deeper to, okay, we need our five a day of our fruit and vegetables. Why do we need that? Why is it important? And where are the good sources? So again, just a little bit more in depth, but it means that we've been able to grow supports that we can offer. So initially we may have had, for example, a tutor on one of the small courses who might be doing a cookery course, would have been a trained chef, but wouldn't have been a trained dietitian. And due to the kind of the restrictions and the rules around our funding, like we can't have somebody go in and give dietetic advice if they're not trained in that. But if they have this guidebook, this is their training document, and this is enabling them to go out with confidence and really give a good explanation and a good education in food safety, healthy eating, and all of that. Again, then we went on a little bit further with the students and developed site-specific guidelines for after-school services on nutritional standards. So this is something that I would really very much encourage any kind of community group to try and find somebody to link in with to carry out a project like this, because we found it very, very beneficial. We've had the dietetic students come in, they did a placement in the aftercare services. They saw all of the restrictions, whether it's, refrigeration, how big the fridges are there, are generally quite small. What kind of cooking facilities are there? How do we go about, dealing with the fussy eaters, the kids who maybe never have been shown a vegetable in their lives before? This was very, very tailored to each after-school service, and it's been really, really beneficial. And again, this is all kind of led just from Dr. Anne Griffin coming in for one event. We've been building up this library of resources that have been extremely beneficial. So we are very, very grateful for that. I suppose the final stage of where we're at with it at the moment is, I suppose, a conglomeration of all of those resources. So now whatever food event we do, whether it's through the Safe Food Ireland community food initiatives, or whether it's through just an external funding for a cookery class or something like that, every participant will get all of this advice. So I suppose the last cover page there that you see, a guide to planning and preparing healthy meals for all the family, that incorporates the healthy eating, the toolbox, and then other resources that both the students have provided us with or led us to, or ones that we've specifically sought out from speaking with the participants about what they'd need. So it might be like a meal planner, it might be a cookbook, like the Square Meals cookbooks that you see there, or budget planners, or just even signposting other supports that are available to them. So it's, I suppose, kind of a wraparound support, every aspect of healthy eating, whether it's shopping, whether it's education, anything at all. We try to kind of cover all of the bases with the toolkits that we give out. So I suppose I have been with the company, with Ballyharrow, for about 1.5 years now. For the last 6 months, I've been working on non-food related things. So we kind of set up the format of our typical course, and I might hand over to Taryn here, if that's okay. Taryn kind of runs the courses as it is, so he'll walk us through what it looks like nowadays.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. And I think where I was going to come at this was very much kind of tell the story and the experiences we've had and what it actually looks like on the ground. And I think that for you, kind of from a webinar format, might make it a bit more understandable of how we run our day-to-day. At the Ballyharrow region, Ballyharrow Development, as it works across North Cork, East Limerick, and it's predominantly a kind of rural location with quite a high disadvantage or a high proportion of disadvantaged areas. So the Ballyhara development in overall has a lot of ways we go out and support these families, these communities, and help obviously in any way we can. And food is a very, very powerful way of it breaks down kind of barriers between people and opens up conversations, very much as Sarah had said previously. We're in that space, we try to tailor everything as to each community as best we can, because no community is the same, no family is the same, and no kind of family makeup is the same. So what we like to basically go in, first of all, from our experiences, is remove all the barriers we can. We will search out groups if we can. We will see if we can be referred groups or referred families from organizations like MABS, from local family resource centres, from internally and some of the towards occupation or the after school services that we run, and see if we can kind of offer an additional wraparound service, which is around giving people, removing the barriers. First of all, we try to provide food free of charge wherever we can. We try to go into local community halls, training kitchens, and provide a tutor to be able to provide in-person or digital online over COVID demonstrations and kind of walkthrough support kind of group kind of efforts and programs. We try not to obviously do them as a one-off. We try to have continuity and run them over several weeks. So we're introducing different ingredients, different cooking techniques, and different, be it vegetarian or be it dietary requirements within those 6 weeks, and see can we add any information and just tailor it to the group as it grows, or as the program grows week on week. And the learnings from that have been massive. I know during the digital kind of delivering we had to do during COVID, there was huge kind of issues and huge amount of support was required that we didn't even know existed. A lot of social isolation, a lot of people were struggling with just putting food on the table, and being able to kind of reach out to people and being able to offer them just this one program took a huge weight off their shoulders. The weight of the world didn't seem as oppressive, and it allowed conversations to start where we were able to maybe refer them towards additional supports, additional kind of training, additional family supports that might be in the area that we were dealing with anyway. But it was just a great introduction and a great way of getting conversations that don't always happen otherwise. And actually every speaker we've had so far has kind of hit off topics and topics that are universal across food. It's such a great way to get conversations around the table. And we found that through all the kind of things we've done. Without 1, 2, 3 little examples on the breaking down barriers, it was only when we actually developed the Healthy Tool kit and we started handing that out in a handout format, that issues along literacy levels became evident to us. Not everyone that we were trying to support was able to access what we were giving them because some of the communities we work in and some of the disadvantaged areas, literacy levels were actually quite low. So in combating that, and it probably COVID maybe lent itself to us going online, having been able to ring them on the phone, offer them support, but then send them links remotely where there was access to videos online, or we were able to all of a sudden get into their kitchen through an online Zoom or an online small project where we were cooking with them, dropping off food to their houses, and supporting them through phone calls, through closed Facebook groups where we could wrap around those additional, as in either resources or materials, or just to be used as a very supportive community. That I had an issue with this dish. It didn't quite go the way I thought about it, and it kind of grew its own legs, and the participants themselves became more and more involved as the weeks went on. What I would kind of where we see it, like Ballyhara development, it is all about making sure it's individually catered for each group, each community that may approach us. But going forward, I think it's all about growing the existing links that can be there for us. If there's already a family support group in an area, it's about linking in with those, linking in with HSC supports, SciCap supports. We work with Healthy Food Made Easy, and we work with the Limerick Food Partnership. And it's being able to be the coordinator of those supports and bring them to an individual level that's actually getting in the homes of each individual family. I think that's where the power of the CFI comes from. It's very hard, as Nicole said, to break this all down because it's quite varied and quite individual on a project by project basis. But that is the goal of the CFI, as well as the Ballyhara Development kind of food stance and what we do in our food supports. We're always open to kind of share any information because we're based predominantly in Limerick, but obviously in North Cork, where this is a UCC event. But feel free to reach out to myself or Nicole, and we'll be happy to kind of show you the kind of journey we took. And if there's any other questions, we're obviously happy to help with that as well. So I'll hand back, Janice.
Okay, thanks very much, Karen and Nicole, and again, an amazing amount of work. And I think it just highlights again the importance, as we've seen in some of the other projects, the importance of linking up with existing supports, and it's not about reinventing the wheel. So thank you both very much for sharing your work with Ballyhara. So we will move on to our next segment, which is UCC's Community Garden and UCC's Farm to Fork project. So Dr. Maria Curran is going to speak with us. Maria is UCC's a sustainability officer, and Maria is going to tell us about the work to ensure a delivery of UCC's sustainability strategy. So thank you very much, Maria.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to go to the start of my, sorry now. So yeah, I work as a sustainability officer in UCC. I've been there since 2016. We're a green flag campus, just I suppose to give you a little bit, anyone that doesn't know much about UCC and sustainability. We were the first university in the world to be awarded a green flag from the Foundation for Environmental Education in 2010. Currently, we're ranked 8th in the Times Higher Education Impact Ranking, which is based around the SDGs. And we're ranked 9th in the UI Green Metric World University Ranking. We're also the only university outside of North America to be awarded a STARS Gold rating, which is organised by the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. So we take sustainability quite seriously. We're on a journey, definitely. We're not perfect by any means, but we're doing a lot in this space. We have a sustainability strategy in place since June 2016, and that covers 9 key areas. So obviously that strategy will be renewed now in the next year or so, but we'll probably be sticking to these general themes. They basically cover everything that we do on campus, our operations, our research, our learning and teaching, and how we engage with the community as well. So you can see there that food, health and well-being is one segment under that sustainability strategy. So specifically then in relation to food, we have a number of kind of key strategic aims. So the aims really are to encourage a more informed attitude amongst our campus community around sustainable food options, then to promote consumption of healthier and more sustainable food options across the university, and also encouraging people to be more sustainable in their home lives as well. Our impact goes far beyond our own university walls. And then in that regard also, to contribute to advancing the food, health and well-being agenda nationally and internationally within the academic discourse. And obviously a lot of people that have spoken today already have contributed massively to that in UCC. We have great strengths in our food research in the university. So obviously we know that food really connects all of the sustainable development goals. And when we are thinking about sustainable development, we're thinking about those massive 17 global goals, but we're looking at how we can act locally. to call it out here, we are currently ranked number 12 globally for SDG 2 zero hunger. But, you know, unless you were living under a rock over the last week, you would know that the Students' Union have just set up a food bank because a lot of our students, unfortunately, are suffering massively with the cost of rent, with the cost of being students currently, and aren't able to afford to buy decent food for themselves. So this is a massive systemic issue that we need to tackle. So like I say, we're by no means perfect. We have a long way to go, but we're doing what we can. So just bring it back to the local agenda. I mentioned there that we have a Stars Gold Award as part of that certification. We actually had to go through all of the food that's purchased in UCC and determine how much of it is local or third parties certified to sustainable standards. So we know that 40% of the food that's purchased on campus comes from local sources or has some kind of sustainability certification. And we're working more and more to support food growing in the local community. So I'll talk about our community garden in a minute, but we've also identified a space that we're looking at. I was speaking with Denise before, pre-pandemic. A lot of this is pre-pandemic as well, I'm afraid, about a space that we have identified where we're looking to hopefully set up a food growing initiative in cooperation with the local community. And then we're also trying to drive change through demonstration on campus with some of the projects that we're doing and supplier engagement. So I'll talk about that a little bit as well in relation to our plastic and packaging initiatives. So kind of one of the starting points, I guess, with our sustainable food agenda in UCC was this, our community garden, which was set up 12 years ago. It's on College Road, if anyone knows the entrance to UCC there by the engineering building. It's just across from there. There's a big gate. It was set up by the Environmental Society and the International Development Society. So there's 3 polytunnels there. And it's a wonderful resource on campus. It's open to students and staff. There's many events happen there, food growing courses, you know, so it's really great to introduce the UCC community to basically the idea, the concept of growing your own food. And we also have some glass houses behind the pharmacy building where KSG are contracted suppliers. They grow a lot of their salad leaves and their herbs in those glass houses. There's 2 there. The other one then is owned by the community gardens. So, you know, it's nice that we have these food growing initiatives directly on campus, and our aim over the next few years would be to expand on the success of that. So then our Farm to Fork programme, to look at where this started, basically sustainability is part of the UCC procurement process. So when we go out to tender on big contracts, those companies that tender in are assessed on their own sustainability merits and what they plan. So KSG are our contracted caterers, and they would have been asked to put forward, you know, some interesting and novel ideas for what they would do around sustainability. And one of those was this Farm to Fork programme. So basically UCC have an 8-acre site at Curraheen, and that is now managed by KSG, and food is grown there. Day to day, it's managed by Waterfall Farms. And the vegetables that are grown there are used in the main restaurant, mainly, but also in the soups which are served in every cafe and outlet across campus. And then you can see there the farm stand, which, you know, there are all the lovely vegetables there from the farm, and that's held a couple of times a year as part of our farmers markets. So it's a really great initiative to show how we can actually eat from local sources. You know, we can grow our own food locally. That farm is the land, it's not certified organic, but there's no synthetic pesticides used there, and they use crop rotation methods to improve the soil there as well. So then moving on from that, I know there was some talk earlier about the whole food system and the use of packaging. So in 2018, we established the Bio Green Cafe, which is a small cafe in the biosciences, and that was completely single-use plastic free. So this was really kind of, unfortunately, novel. You'd think it wouldn't be that unusual, but it was. And it was possible to do this because it's a small cafe, and we were able to, when I say we, KSG, were able to source the items for sale there locally. So they were able to go to the farmers market, to the English market, and buy the bread in brown paper, buy the ham and the cheese in brown paper, as opposed to, if they were getting large quantities into a large restaurant like the Main, it would have been much more difficult to source zero plastic options. So basically, yeah, completely behind, in front of house and back of house is totally plastic free in that cafe. Again, I have to say, pre-pandemic, we are obviously having issues now with an increase in the use of disposable plastics since the pandemic hit. We also run things like Meatless Mondays at KSG, where we have, the main restaurant is meat free, basically all the options. We were doing that. We started off doing it twice a semester, then it became weekly. And down in the right-hand lower corner there, you can see that was a living lab project that we had in 2019, where we tried these reusable lunch boxes in the main restaurant. So if someone wanted to get a takeaway in the main restaurant, they could take one of these lunch boxes. It was a trial deposit return scheme, basically. A trial deposit return scheme where you would pay a deposit for the lunch box, and when you brought it back, you'd either get the deposit back or you'd get another clean lunch box. We also have our own honey harvested on campus in our beehives on the North Mall, which is all part of our kind of improving pollinator diversity program. So, fitting in with our wildflower meadows, we have these honeybee hives on North Mall campus, which are managed by a local beekeeper, and our almond nectar honey then is sold in the visitor centre in UCC. So last year then, obviously, we know we still have an awful lot to do. Like I said, last year, our students organised a climate assembly, which was open to all students and staff in the university. Across those teams in our sustainability strategy, looking at what our university community thought that we needed to really act on over the next few years. And the main things really, which have come up obviously in all of the talks today, really is improved availability of more sustainable food choices, more nutritious sustainable food choices, more affordability, and greater urgency on everything that we're doing. Basically, we're doing a lot, but we need to be doing more and faster. So that's a whistle-stop tour of sustainability in relation to food in UCC. I hope it was useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to go straight on to our next section, where we're focusing on food waste in particular. So we have two speakers here, and the first of our speakers is Keelan Tobin, who's a researcher in the Munster Technical University, and Keelan is a researcher at the Clean Technology Centre in MTU, and Keelan is also sits on the steering committee of the Cork Food Policy Council. So Keelan, I'll hand straight over to you. Thank you.
Super, thanks a million. In the interest of time, do I need to kind of keep it short? Just checking with you, Janice.
Yeah, so we're here until 4 o'clock. So we have yourself and Richard. So we then just have a few minutes for closing up and wrapping up. So
okay, this might be on speed. I don't want to eat into Richard's time too much. So thanks to everyone. The presentations have been really interesting. So as Janice mentioned, I work with the Clean Technology Centre at Munster Technological University. And for, I suppose, the last few years, I've kind of worked across a number of different projects, as well as research projects, as well as programmes, all to do with food waste in Ireland. It's something that the Cork Food Policy Council has long had an interest and a kind of a participation in. So these are just some of the various things. The Stop Food Waste programme is a householder facing programme. Saver Food is a free support for food businesses that it's funded by the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. And Composting Ireland is something that myself and the team who previously worked on Stop Food Waste have come up with, the composting was taken out of Stop Food Waste. So we really wanted the composting to continue. So we established Composting Ireland last year with that in mind. And the report on the right was published in 2019. So this was a kind of a piece of research that we undertook as EPA research into commercial food waste in Ireland. So I'm going to kind of try my best to fit in as much as I can. So many of you will be aware, I suppose, that at a national level, Ireland is signed up to the Sustainable Development Goals, and Target 12.3 aims to have per capita global food waste by the year 2030. So this is, I suppose, kind of the overarching thing. Food waste is a big issue. It's a significant contributor to climate change, and I think often we maybe don't give it the sort of credit or significance that we would to maybe energy or transport. So this is just a visual that we came up with under the Stop Food Waste program, where we were kind of trying to convey to people all that's wasted when food is wasted. It's all of, or many of us are guilty of, small little scraps at the end of a meal, or all these little things. It's easy to kind of tuck food waste away, maybe in a continual or consistent kind of a basis. And in an overall sense, I suppose it doesn't always represent or reflect the value of what's gone into putting food on the table to begin with. So this kind of, I suppose, is a visual way of representing that idea that we need to value food that bit more. So the good news is there's something we can do about it. In an overall sense, I suppose, if we look at the waste hierarchy, and indeed the food waste hierarchy, waste prevention is better than anything else. A great start is segregation. Unfortunately, the food waste has an incredible capacity to contaminate other waste streams. But increasingly, we see a greater and greater rollout of brown bins, as well as home composting and other different options for people, depending on whether it's commercial settings, workplaces, or households. So we would very much recommend that people sort of measure or look at, or record what food is being wasted. So whether this is at a household level or a commercial level, if you don't kind of measure it or capture it, it's hard to kind of keep a track of what's actually been wasted. So many people say to me, "Oh, I never waste food," and the reality is usually somewhat different. So this is just a little bit of a snapshot of kind of what some of our research kind of can be like. This photo on the left is kind of the bins of a supermarket, and I think many of you would agree that, if that was in your fridge, you'd probably make the dinner with it, no problem. So it's I suppose illuminating to see the good food that is also going to waste. The top right hand corner is from a staff canteen, where staff, as part of their kind of pay package, they avail of a free meal every day in work. And these were the different kind of categories of food that was kind of coming from plates. So there's kind of different actions that we can all take. Again, I suppose, whether that's at kind of the individual level or on a community level. So I'm going to maybe just kind of fast track through some of this, because this is a bit more detail about the research that we did. So it has less of a community focus. So you can kind of go to that research and report if that's kind of what you're interested in. So we looked at both food service and food retail. Common types of food waste tend to be cheap and bulky things, small and expensive things. So kind of your toast and spuds, baked beans, or porridge, and then your kind of expensive sauces, butter, coleslaw, milk, cream, all those kind of things. So these, we generated benchmarks, which I think were referred to earlier, of a level of food waste per cover served. So this is a number of grams or kilograms per person served in different, whether it's hotel or restaurants or canteens. So again, it's not, there isn't a kind of a quick fix or a panacea when it comes to food waste. Often the solutions can be varied, and I suppose we recommend that, people take one small action and then go from there, build it up and kind of look to your successes and try and motivate the staff in a full team if it's, say, in a restaurant. This coleslaw example was where the kitchen porters were the ones scraping the coleslaw into the bin. With every sandwich that was served, there was coleslaw going out in colossal quantities, and the chefs never realized that all of it was, or so much of it was coming back. And to resolve it, they didn't take coleslaw off the menu, they just tweaked the recipe so that it was actually something people wanted to eat. And then sure enough, that really significantly reduced the level of coleslaw that was being wasted. So it seems kind of too easy, but very often you have to sort of do the analysis to kind of come up with a solution like that. So I'm the program manager for the Saver Food program. Last week with Minister McConnell, we launched the Saver Food e-tool. This is for food service businesses. So if you're in that realm, this might be something suitable for you. So to bring it more back to a kind of a community level, many of you might remember, I don't know if you maybe tasted the free lunch that we distributed to people at the launch of Cork Food Policy Council. It was on St. Patrick's Day back in 2013. You recognise a few faces here, of course. So it's very much been something that many of us within Cork Food Policy Council have been interested in from the very start. So these are just a few nice photographs as well, a bit like what Sarah showed. Different ways that we've tried to sort of engage the public around food and food waste have been the Harvest Festival over the years, where we've gotten a significant amount of food from Food Cloud. They redistribute surplus food, and we've made a big feast and tried to feed people. All of these events have been a major kind of community effort. And you can see here even just the hands, the kind of the level, the scale of feeding a few hundred or a couple of thousand people. It involves peeling a lot of garlic, and you can very often create something that's really tasty with surplus food. So over the years, you'll see Owen McGurk here. He is one of the founders of the BF Food Initiative, which later became Food Cloud Hubs. And he sits on both Cork Food Policy Council Steering Committee as well as the board of Food Cloud. So he has engaged people in food growing and food growing courses over the years as well. So just to highlight one thing before I'm done, you may have heard about the Cork Urban Soil Project. This has been kind of spearheaded by Virginia in particular, Virginia and Donal and their staff in My Goodness, including Molly Garvey. Sorry, you know, when you mention people, you're nearly inevitably leaving people out. So I probably should stop. So now this has been kind of a few years in the making, and we applied for funding. We got Local Agenda 21 funding, and Cork Environmental Forum agreed to kind of take this under their umbrella. The Clean Technology Centre played a very small role in that. A biodigester, a piece of equipment that had been initially donated to the Tourism and Hospitality Department in CIT. It had kind of fallen into disuse, I suppose, and it needed repair, and that has been since resolved. So it has been transported down to the marina where My Goodness have it. And you can kind of check in. I'd like to show you a little clip, a little video of a very enthusiastic Virginia, but I don't think I have time for that. So I won't. But she, if you keep an eye on the My Goodness social media, I guess she emphasizes that it's an experiment. They don't know what kind of a output or outcome is going to come from this project, but it's about kind of looking for local solutions. And I think as well as was very well articulated early on, you know, this isn't something that Cork Food Policy Council has been at the centre of, but just trying to kind of play that supporting role and bring these different actors together. So I guess maybe from your perspective, I don't know exactly the makeup of the people who are watching this, but just if food waste is something that you're interested in and that you'd like to do something actively about, Food Cloud are often looking for volunteers, whether that's somebody to do drive the van or to, you know, do different things, cleaning or various things. It's a lovely way of contributing locally. So that might be something that might interest you. So these are some of the outputs from the research that we've done in the Clean Technology Centre. Again, they're all kind of more for within the food industry. And these are from mywaste.ie. They're new bin signs that kind of hopefully will create a very clear type of signage for bins so that we can kind of improve segregation overall, because I know it can be very confusing for people, whether it's at home or in all sorts of settings. So that's it. Thanks a million. Sorry now for the haste.
Thank you, Keelan. Thank you, Keelan. And so sorry for my time management maybe earlier that caused you to rush.
No,
but
not at all.
No, I think that was fantastic. It gave a really nice overview of the work that's going on. And I think it's shocking when you see that 4 kilograms of coleslaw just been thrown out, but from that restaurant. So I think it highlights the importance of your work. And I'm going to go straight over to our next speaker is Dr. Richard O'Shea. So Richard is a lecturer in sustainability in enterprise with the School of Engineering in UCC and has worked as a postdoc researcher and with bioenergy and biofuels research group in Mari. So Richard, I will hand straight over to you.
Thanks, Janice. How long do I have, by the way? Is it 5 minutes or is it 10 minutes?
10 minutes.
10 minutes, is it? Okay. I have some slides put together, but I'll actually only put up one and I'll talk around my research because I actually don't think I have enough time to get through them, if that's okay. So I'll just share that one slide. Can people see that slide? Can people see the slide? Perfect.
I can see it, yeah.
And okay, so essentially what I'll do is I'll show this to kind of give context to the research that we do in our group. Like Janice kindly said, my name is Richard O'Shea and I'm a lecturer in sustainability and enterprise. And a lot of the research that we do in the circular economy, energy and environmental systems research group is looking at how to decarbonize agriculture and industry. So looking at greenhouse gas emissions in Ireland in 2018, you can see that most of them, 56%, came from energy. The next largest contributor was agriculture, followed by land use change, industrial processes, and then waste. And then within the energy category, it was transport, electricity and oil, other sources, and then manufacturing and construction. And that's typically where food processing is. So kind of the key contributors to greenhouse gas emissions in Ireland are food production, and then food processing also is a key contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. So in our research group, we do research kind of at a very large scale with very large companies, both nationally and internationally. And we also do it at a very small scale with local farmers. So in terms of local research, we're working with a local cheese manufacturer in County Cork who has a dairy herd and a small scale farmhouse cheese manufacturing process. And they produce cheese and they also have a byproduct, namely whey. And currently that whey is spread on land as a fertilizer because they're too small to capture or process that whey into a nutritional supplement. In our research group, we look at the concept or the technology of anaerobic digestion, where we can convert biodegradable material into biogas, which is a source of energy. So you can use that biogas to replace the fuel used in the cheese production system. That will reduce the scope 1 greenhouse gas emissions. So scope 1 greenhouse gas emissions are the greenhouse gases associated with the fuel that you burn in your process. Scope 2 emissions are associated with the electricity you use. And then scope 3 emissions are with the value chain of your process, all of the upstream inputs and downstream uses. As well as being able to produce energy, anaerobic digestion can produce digestate, which can be applied to land as a fertilizer. And that, by applying that digestate as a fertilizer, it can reduce the consumption of synthetic nitrogen fertilizer like ammonia or CAN or 10-10-20 or urea. And that reduces the carbon footprint, again, of the production of food in agriculture. Looking at the food production process or the food processing sector, we do a lot of work with distilleries because there's a large movement amongst large food processors and drink producers to reduce their environmental impact and to become more sustainable. And looking at sustainable, it's not just CO2 emissions, it's not just decarbonizing. There has to be an economic element to it, there has to be a social element to it, and there's an environmental element to it. And some of the research that we do with, I think it's 10 distilleries in 8 different countries, is we look at how they can use their byproducts, which are currently either spread on land or currently used as animal feed, how they can convert them into energy using anaerobic digestion, and then reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by reducing their fuel consumption, mitigating their scope 1 emissions, and by using the digestate as a fertilizer on land that grows the cereal or the barley or the corn that they use in their distillation process to reduce their scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions. From the community perspective, anaerobic digestion can be a contentious technology because of odor, because of traffic movements to move material, and it can be quite expensive in terms of the size of these plants. So what we do is we carry out something called multi-criteria decision analysis, where we develop thousands of different scenarios and we quantify them based on different metrics. How big is it? How many trucks need to leave the site? How many how many vehicle movements is that per day? Are the vehicle movements at night? How many greenhouse gas, what's the greenhouse gas emission savings? What's the cost of the system? What's the size of the system? And using this multi-criteria decision analysis, we can hone in on the scenario that best meets the goal of achieving sustainability with regards to economic performance, greenhouse gas emission reduction, and the community buy-in or community acceptance. And we do research with distilleries because they're willing to fund us. But the same techniques and the same methods can be applied to all areas of food production and food processing to enable a circular economy by reusing waste material to mitigate your impact on the environment. So that's a brief overview of the research that we do in our group. I hope I haven't taken too long, and I hope I've provided enough kind of depth that people are interested in. The goal, obviously, from food processing is that there is no waste, or that the waste can be used for human consumption. However, that is not the case currently and may not be the case depending on the material that is generated. So that's where we look at anaerobic digestion as kind of a last step scavenger. But it is part of a bigger picture and is usually seen as that kind of last step scavenger at the end.
Okay, Richard, that was a very succinct overview of your work, so I'm very clear. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Colin Sage, now to wrap up. And Colin, there was just one question in the Q&A that you might maybe consider in your wrap up. And it was a question from Denise Cahill asking if the speakers believe a citizens' assembly around sustainable and healthy food systems for Ireland will be beneficial and productive in the current climate of polarised thinking on our food system. So Colin, over to you.
Thanks, Janice. Do you want me just to wrap up, or are we going to go round to get the speaker's response to that question? We won't really have time to do that, will we?
If our speakers have any thoughts on that before you wrap up?
Okay, yeah.
If people have a couple of extra minutes, just I'm conscious of time, but I think it's an important question. And before we wrap up.
I think it would be beneficial. Like if you look at from a sustainability point of view, if you look at the greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture, approximately, I think it's like 65% are from cattle. And yes, we export a lot of beef and we export a lot of dairy, but they are a huge producer of greenhouse gas emissions in Ireland. The flip side of that is if we don't make it, it'll be made somewhere else. So I think kind of an open, a balanced and a fair discussion of the role of, agriculture in our sustainability, challenge needs to be there. Do we stop producing, or do we produce less meat or beef? And if we do, will that impact be shifted to a different climate that's less capable of producing cheese and beef? Or should people inherently stop eating meat? I thoroughly believe we all probably eat too much. And we can reduce that, but it comes into kind of what do we value as people? Do we value comfort and extravagance, or do we value sustainability? I think it's a question that we all have to answer personally, I think. But I think an informed discussion a group discussion would be hugely beneficial.
Yeah. Sorry, was there anybody else?
I'm happy to comment as well, Colin. I would support the idea. I think the citizens' assemblies have done a very good job in the past. I know not always are their recommendations sort of adopted, but I think the conversation particularly within the media, the discourse has kind of tended to be very polarized, as Denise points out. I think very often there's kind of a staunch vegan and a, you know, sheep farmer kind of pitted against one another. And I think where you find most people is kind of somewhere in between. And I think it's that in between conversation is what needs to be had.
Yeah. 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 Well, I think if I can come in just in the interests of timing, really, as much as anything else, I think that's a great question from Denise, and I think it's absolutely correct. The polarization that's taken place in Ireland around this debate is problematic, and I don't think it's been helped by some of the commentators in the media who've been, you know, ramping up a certain level of hostility towards the environmental lobby. Frankly, those of us who paid attention to the climate change debate we appreciate just how fundamentally catastrophic, you know, things are looking if we don't take some action. And the process of a kind of the process is exemplified by the Agri-Food Strategy 2030 strategy, by saying, well, if we don't do it, the Brazilians will, or something else. It's frankly nonsensical, and we have to take some action. What it means, of course, in the interest both of planetary health, but also of human health, we know we need to be moving towards more plant-based eating. That's not to say everyone is expected to become vegan overnight. On the contrary, the question, though, is to move towards just gradually reducing meat consumption, but ramping up as far as we can our production of plant-based foods in Ireland. And frankly, there are tremendous opportunities for doing that. And I think one of the things that really one of the points that Jack revealed, it's not just the neighbor food model, but all other facilitating mechanisms that serve as hubs to intermediate between eaters, consumers, if you like, and producers. And one of the blockages I think that we've had in the food system is that there are so few possibilities, so few outlets for farmers to think seriously about being able to commercialize their products. And we have to find ways of enabling farmers to think about getting off the beef or dairy, kind of track, and to look to diversifying, even if partially to begin with, but gradually sort of ramping that up. So I think thinking about new intermediate kind of arrangements for bringing farmers or producers and consumers together is very important. And I think what's also come through this afternoon's really phenomenally great presentations is the value of network building, and the role that the Food Policy Council has played in the background, just trying to connect people together. And the work of bringing in the permaculture students from Kinsale, the work that's being done to facilitate small businesses like My Goodness. There's a whole set of actors in there. One of the actors that's missing, I mean, clearly UCC are very much involved in this process, but is making sure the other public policy or public institutions are also engaged. And we've had some conversations in the past with CUH about their food procurement strategy. And we need to get the City Council to shape up as well on this front, to find ways of really thinking about the plate that they serve their people in terms of offering more local food. So public procurement is being seen as a way of trying to connect up the provision of food locally with local growers. And I would just say that, I mean, Fionnuala's discussion really around food growing and the initiatives that are being rolled out, I think reveals and demonstrates the co-benefits that come from all of that work. We're not just about producing food, but there are all these other co-benefits that arise, the physical exercise of being out, planting up raised beds and being engaged in weeding and all of that kind of thing. This is all part of an increasing recognition that some physical activity and what we might call green exercise, being connected with the earth in some way, is so incredibly valuable for mental health, let alone for physical health. And of course, it's all about community building too, neighbors speaking to neighbors because they're outside and in neutral space. The other thing I really wanted to say, because I think Sarah brought this out really tremendously well, was the role of kitchens. And you know, one of the problems with the food system is the way it individualizes us all as consumers to the degree where we buy individual servings of something. And really one way we're going to have to find a way of overcoming some of that is through collective solutions. And of course, community kitchens are one way to do that, where people can be gathered together in a kitchen, sharing food, learning from each other, learning experiences, telling stories, and also really genuinely becoming much more skilled around food, much more familiar, confident around food, because people lack confidence around food. They're not sure about, you know, the materiality of these different kinds of food products. And I think that's when genuine empowerment begins to arise. So I think overall, what we've had this afternoon has been some really remarkable insights into the multifaceted nature of the food system. And I think, you know, the role of the Food Policy Council, which is, you know, clearly hearty and hale and really thriving and doing lots of really great work, is instrumental. It still remains the only Food Policy Council in Ireland, remember. Somehow I don't know why it is that no one else has seemed to see the value of this. But I mean, you know, long may it survive, and we've had a really great set of representations this afternoon. So thank you all very much for that.
Thank you, Colin. And just with that, I suppose I just want to thank yourself and acknowledge your commitment and your drive in setting up the Food Policy Council, and also the continuous support from Denise Cahill in the Food Policy Council. Denise does an immense amount of work, a lot of which goes under the radar, and alongside her partner in crime, Maria Young, but also kind of the wider Food Policy Council steering group. I think, you know, it's a really nice group to be involved with, a dynamic group, and you know, we're not going anywhere soon. We'll be around for another while and keep pushing and you know, shouting about the Cork Food Policy Council and the work, and looking for the opportunities in the light of all of the challenges that we face, but looking at the opportunities that we can take. I'd like to thank all of our participants, and I know we did run a little over time, and apologies in terms of my time management on that front, but I think the conversations that were going on were just so fruitful, pardon the pun, but I think it was just great to hear, and kind of wasn't wanting to, you know, I think they were stories that needed to be heard. So thanks to everyone who's stayed with us, and just, I suppose, a plug for the other School of Public Health webinar that's on tomorrow at 10:30, and that will about the future of public health. Again, it's part of the UCC Civic and Community Engagement Week. Shameless plug, but it will be another fantastic webinar. So thanks everybody. Bye.
Thanks. Hi, Keelan.
Thanks.